Belshazzar. I'm Persian by birth. I'm a member of the Parthian Empire. That's an empire that rivals Rome, and it's centered in what you would call Iran today. But I'm a member of an ancient order called the Magi. You might say, well, what's the Magi? I thought you were a wise man or a wise guy. A Magi was an order of guys who studied a lot. And we got into all kinds of sciences. Often, many of our members were also priests of religions to false gods. I'm not one of those guys. And I'll explain that to you as I go forward. But I've come tonight to tell you about a story from my perspective. You know the story, but maybe you don't know my perspective. So I'll share that with you today. But first let me tell you how I came to believe in the one true God. You see, for years we gathered all the wise people and noble people from the countries that we conquered. This began under Assyria, actually, and then Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar made it very prominent. And he would bring in the smart young people from other countries, and he would have them trained by the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans were the smart guys, okay? Have them trained by the Chaldeans in all of their learning. And we'd study the sciences, and we'd study the literature, and we'd study the history of various cultures in order that we might be able to advise the king in matters of state. And so we did. Well, as you undoubtedly know, under Nebuchadnezzar, the land of Judah, in the nation of Israel, the land of Judah was conquered. And many of the noble people carried off in the first wave. There were actually 3 waves of captivity. And the first one of those was a young man named Daniel. Now Daniel was of the royal line. He was a smart guy. He was young. He was vibrant, full of vim and vigor. And he and some of his buddies, they were put into the training program, a 3-year training program, kind of like you would do university. And we put them through the rigors of our learning. We taught them all the stuff. These guys were head and shoulders above everyone else. They were really smart. They really had good insight. And in spite of all our training, they never, ever abandoned the belief in their God, because they believed there was just one God. All the rest of the Magi at that time, of course, that was 500 years before I was born. But anyway, most of the Magi believed in multiple gods and all that stuff, but not them. And Daniel in particular proved through a lifetime of service. He served for over 60 years under 4 kings as a trusted advisor, and was wise. Got in trouble sometimes because he wouldn't abandon his God. He refused to worship an idol of Nebuchadnezzar one time, along with his buddies. They escaped that by God's hand. Another time he refused to quit praying, got thrown in the lion's den. You remember that story, right? He was not a dentist who pulled the lion's teeth, the old kids' song notwithstanding. God closed the mouths of the lions, and he escaped that. It was at that time that a certain portion of the Magi began to believe, this God of Israel, he's probably real. And we began to acquire whatever understanding we could of it. Daniel had access to the Torah, and so he had some of the old stories of Israel. We studied those things and the things they said. And one in particular that's relevant to the story I want to relate to you today happened back in, it's written in the book of Numbers, chapter 24, verse 17. A guy named Balaam. Now Balaam was another wise guy from the east. Okay? He talked with God, but he didn't really have his motives all together right, and he ended up getting killed on account of it. But anyway, he was a smart guy. God spoke to him. And he was hired by the king of Moab to come and curse the nation of Israel as they were coming toward the promised land. He said, I want you to curse these people so I can go out and beat them in battle. And now Balaam was interested in the money, but God told him, you don't say anything unless I tell you to say it. So when he got up to speak over the children of Israel, all he could do was bless them. And then the 3rd time he spoke, he uttered a prophecy that said, a star will arise in Judah, and a scepter will rise out of Israel. And that's relevant to this story because I'm going to tell you, I was in my studies, and I was in the observatory one night doing my regular rotation there. And as I was there and observing the stars, I saw a star I didn't know before. So I got out all of our charts, because we charted this stuff. And I looked. That star wasn't there before. Now this wasn't a little bitty dim one we just missed because it was cloudy. This was a star that was bright. It was, anybody that was accustomed to looking at the stars, they saw that's a new star. What's up with the new star? Because one of the things I appreciated about studying the stars and the creation is it was dependable. It didn't change all the time. And so it just changed. And I said, what's up with this? And I looked through all the charts, never been there before. So the next morning I get the other guys around and said, look, there's something I saw last night. I saw a star right here. Hadn't been there before. What's up with that? Well, they kind of thought maybe I'd been nipping at the bottle or something. But that night, they had a whole crew come in and look at it. Sure enough, there in the western sky over Israel was a star. We all began to talk about that, and it came to our mind. We read about this somewhere. We went and we pulled out the Torah because we remembered it was in there, and we got to reading and looking, and all of us just devouring it, trying to figure it out. And we finally found that prophecy I just mentioned to you. We said, well, it mentions a star. We see the star. It mentions a scepter. That means a king. A king must have been born in Israel. Now, it was common for us to go. We were dignitaries. We were nobles in the empire there. And it was common for us to go and welcome newborn princes and nobles and that sort of stuff. So we did that kind of thing all the time. But we didn't typically go somewhere like this, because you see, Israel was under the order of the Roman Empire. They were our great rivals. And so no way we were going to just go there on a whim. We had to get permission to go and all that stuff. But immediately we said, we need to go welcome this king, because if there's a newborn king that causes a star to go in the sky, we need to see this king. Okay? That's why we call Wise Guy. Okay? We need to go do that. So we start making our preparation. Now, you don't just get up and just ride from Persia to Israel. Now, we're Persians. I've noticed in looking around your area that you always showing wise men riding on camels. We were Persians. We didn't ride on camels. That's the poor folk. Okay? We rode on horses. But that's all right. Y'all can portray it however you want. We rode on horses. But we also took gifts, expensive gifts. And if you're going to haul expensive gifts 900 miles, you better take somebody to guard it. Okay? And we're smart guys. We're not warriors. So we had to get a contingent, a military escort to go with us. And so we did. It took us about a week to round everything up. Now we had access to money and to wealth, so gathering up the gifts weren't that hard. We brought 3 gifts. I've got them laid out over here, demonstrated there. We brought gold, we brought frankincense, and we brought myrrh. Gold, it's obvious, is just something you give somebody as a gift. But the frankincense and myrrh are spices common to our country that were rare in other places, and therefore a very expensive and nice gift to take to somebody in this case. A typical kind of gift that we would give for a noble birth. We gather up our gifts, we gather up our military escort. It can't be too big because it might look like we're going there to raid our enemies. But it can't be too small because the thieves and bandits along the way might ambush us. So we get the right size, about 30 of our infantry go with us. And so they got to walk on foot. So we anticipate that it's going to take about 35 to 40 days to walk all that way. I don't know how long it's going to take for this skirt to fall off. But tell me about the magi, I'm not a tailor, all right? And if we're going to go to Israel, where do you reckon we're going to go? We're going to go to the capital. That's where the king's going to be, right? That's what we assume. So we head for Jerusalem. And we get there. It's about 42 days, I'm estimating, after the star appeared, assuming we saw it on the night it first appeared. And at least they claim they haven't seen it then. So about 42 days later, we get there. We arrive into Jerusalem, and we cause quite a stir. Because, see, here is a military escort from the rival empire that showed up in town with nobles leading the way, and they start asking to speak to the king. You know what? We got an audience right away. Oh, Herod, he's a hateful old fella, and he was old, very old by this time. He'd been reigning about 36 years already. And he was one mean dude. But now, when he heard that we were looking for the baby born king of the Jews, he killed two of his own boys already because he thought they might want his throne before he died. He killed his own boys. He sure wasn't interested in this other. He's interested in this other guy, but not in a positive way. So he gave us the audience. He asked us about it. We told him when we'd seen the star. We told him that we believed that was a signal that it was a king born. And we wanted to know where he was. He said, I don't know. He wasn't born to my wife. So he called in his wise men, wise guys. He called them in. Says, where is it that the king, the Messiah, is supposed to be born? So they looked through their records and they came to Micah. And in Micah it said that out of Bethlehem would be the Lord would be born. So they told him, the king is going to be in Bethlehem. So he tells the wise men, said, you go down to Bethlehem, you find this king, and after you find him, you come back and tell me so I can go down and worship him too. Because he'd be the Messiah. But now Herod didn't have any intention of worshiping him. Let's cut him up with a sword and then worship him. He didn't have any intention of doing that. But we didn't know that. We thought it was all, in good taste or whatever. So we get up and we start to go for Bethlehem. Now at this point, we actually talked about calling it off. Because if this king was king, why wasn't he born in the palace? And if he was just out some little insignificant hamlet, maybe he wasn't that big a deal. And so we start to talk about, should we go and think that we're here, we've already come this far. And then we see on the horizon toward Bethlehem, we see the light appearing. Now the star had been in the sky all this time, but now the light's down closer to the horizon. And we're seeing this and thinking, that's a little easier to follow. Now if we'd been there all along, we'd have just gone there to start with. We'd have just got on ahead. That would have been all right with us. But anyway, we now see it a little closer. So we head that way. It's only about a 5-mile jaunt, so we head on out. We see the light. And when we get close to Bethlehem, we get up into the field surrounding it there. We decide we need to bivouac our military dudes down. We'll set them down so we can go about the business that we're there for. So we come to this field. And while we're there, we meet some shepherds. There's a little bald-headed, short, chubby shepherd that I met there. He said he's a good friend of mine. We got to chatting just a little bit while the guys were settling in. We told him we'd come find the king of the Jews. He said, we already saw him. It's awesome. He told us how to get into town. We could already tell by the light that he was that, but he was a helpful guy. We head on in. Now, another thing I see in the pictures around town is you always show 3 wise men. We had 3 gifts. There were more than 3 of us. There were 8 of us. You know how I know that? Well, just made it up. Anyway, we don't know that it's just 3. Okay, there's more than 3, probably. Because everybody in our group was excited about coming. But we show up with our 3 gifts, and we come, and the light is shining down on this one house. Pretty good indication that's the house we want. But we're wondering, what are we doing in this neighborhood? And what's a king doing in this neighborhood? We were perplexed about that. So we go here and we knock on the door. A young man opens the door, clearly a working class kind of a guy. Nice face. Opened up to see these noblemen from another country showing up at his door, and he wasn't even awestruck. He wasn't even overwhelmed by that. shows us in it. And we tell him, we've come to find the baby born, King of the Jews. He said, well, come with me. He takes us into another room. There's the baby and the mother. Now, I'm going to try to explain to you what I felt then. And I'm sure I won't do it justice. I never do when I try. But let me tell you, we were accustomed to this kind of thing. We were accustomed to coming into a room like this with a newborn noble kid. And we have great swelling words. I mean, we study all that stuff, how to say things that are impressive. And we're going to say all this stuff, and we're going to bless this kid because we're big shots. And they're going to be so happy that they got our attention. Let me tell you what, anything like that. When we went in there with these gifts of great value and our robes that, are nice, and our great swelling words, the only thing we could do was fall on our knees and worship this one, because the air felt like lightning in it. And the silence was deafening because there was a presence that we could not explain, that we had not experienced. We'd studied everything we knew to study. We'd studied every religion. We'd studied every bit of literature and history. But never had we come face to face with the creator of the universe lying there. It was then that I got my first inclination that wisdom was not an attribute for me to obtain. It was a person for me to worship. All the wisdom of all and knowledge was hidden in him. There, God, who had taken on himself the form of a baby and had deposited in him all the attributes of God. And all we could do was bow on our faces before him. We worshiped him not based on anything he'd done. He was a month and a half old. All he'd done was cry, sleep, eat, soil his diaper. That's all he's done. We worshiped him because of who he is. Because of the person that he is, we worship him not unlike we should do now. We talked with Joseph and Mary as long as we felt like we could stay there. We didn't much want to leave. We'd spent our whole lives studying and never came close to learning what we're having deposited in us by an encounter with God of all creation. Well, we had to leave. So we left, went back out to the hills, spent the night there. That night I had a dream. And in that dream, an angel came to me and said, don't go back to Herod. He means ill toward this baby. Don't go back to him. Go home by another way. So I got up with my buddy Moshe to find a different way out of town. We got to talking a little bit. We got to talk about some similarities. See, we're very different. Moshe the shepherd, he was a low on the totem pole social kind of guy. He was a poor working man that just worked hard all the time. He was the first one God sent a message to because God wanted to say, I'm here for everybody. I'm not just here for the rich and the famous and the powerful, but I'm rich and famous and powerful. And it came to me too. He showed a star to me on the night that the baby was born. He showed the star to me. And so we began to compare notes. You know what we found out? We found out that both of us, God came to both of us in ways we would understand. You see, he appeared to Moshe and his buddies with the angels in heaven. And it was a great shock to them. They wouldn't have noticed the star. But my little egghead self in my observatory was oblivious to the angels. What he showed me was a star in the heavens that piqued my interest. He said, I'm interested in that. And you know what? He comes to you the same way. Yes. He comes to you in a way that you understand him. And you may not understand him the way I understand him, but he comes to both of us. And to both of us, he gave us directions on how to find him. Maybe I followed a star. And when the star got to be too high in the sky and I had to narrow it to 5 miles, he shined the Shekinah glory of God onto the house until I found it. So Moshe, he just told him, you're going to find him in a stable. You're familiar with stables. You tend to, hang around those places. You're going to find him in a stable, wrapped in swaddling clothes, laying in a feed trough. That's where you're going to find him down in Bethlehem. But he told both of us how to find him. And you know what? The Holy Spirit of God's going to tell you how to find Jesus. And for both of us, he showed us that he didn't need the wealth of the world. He didn't need the fame of man. He didn't need anything because he created all of that stuff. The silver is his, the gold's his, the cattle on 1,000 hills is his. He didn't need that. What he wanted was our heart. My heart, Moshe's heart. He wanted us. And he showed us that that was found in a person, not in a performance. And that person was Jesus. So our stories weren't that different, although they were vastly different. They were the same. Well, the same night that I had a dream about not going back to see Herod, Joseph had a dream. He said, Herod's going to try to kill this boy. You need to get up and go to Egypt. And then, Mary and Joseph hadn't had much money. Going to Egypt would not have been possible had we not arrived. Now, all of a sudden, they've come into some wealth. And the flight to Egypt became a possibility. And prophecies that the Messiah would be brought up out of Egypt was now going to be made possible. You see, God had everything planned from the beginning. I began to see wisdom like I'd never seen it. And I'd pursued it my whole life. All I wanted people to think when they saw me is, there goes a wise man. And I saw that I didn't know anything. I saw that there was wisdom in God's choosing to send his regal son in a poor circumstance. In a humble dwelling, raised by working class people. And there was wisdom in that. I would not have guessed that. I saw that the wealth of the world paled in comparison to the light of his glory. I began to see that wisdom, the wisdom of God, is first pure, then peaceable, and gentle, full of mercy and good works, without hypocrisy. I began to understand wisdom I'd never understood before. And so what I'd say to you is God's directing you to Jesus. Okay, maybe you already know Jesus. I realize in this country a lot of people do. In this place, probably most of you do. He's still directing you to come see him, to come to him. And he's directing you in ways that you'll understand. But let me just point out a few that seem to relate to what I understand. You see, he's given you the whole creation to look at. Everything in order, everything precise, everything making sense. That didn't happen by chance, but he put it up there, and it says in your New Testament, it says that he put it there that his invisible attributes might be seen. That's like your star. Well, that's like your angel. It's telling you there's God. There is God. And if there's a God, it's your duty as his creation to find him. And you will seek him and find him when you search for him with all your heart. That's his promise for us. So there's wisdom in how he laid things out. There's wisdom in that he came not just to make you perform a certain way. He came to change who you are. He came to eradicate the sin which has you twisted up and eaten up on the inside. And he came and he gave his son to correct that condition for you so that you can be restored to the relationship with him. That was wisdom that I've never seen and could not have dreamed of, no matter how much learning I had. I saw that in his wisdom, he didn't just clean us up, but he deposited inside of us his Holy Spirit to walk in us, to guide us, to say when we try to turn to the left or to the right, saying, this is the way, walk in it, that we might hear his voice and follow after him. There's wisdom in his approach to our life. And he did all of this to call you to himself. One last thing I saw in the wisdom of God. I saw that not only did he lay out prophecies hundreds of years ahead of time saying there's going to be a star over Israel so a bunch of wise guys from Persia can ride across and worship him, okay? That was amazing enough. But you know what? What we brought as gifts, normal gifts that you give to a king is just born. They actually had meaning. We didn't know that. The God of all creation was stirring in us on what to bring. and establishing the norms of our day so that it would point to his son. You see, the gold is a picture of his royalty. He's the king. He's not just the king, he's the king over all kings. He's the king over the whole universe. He's the king over everything. And the gold was a picture of that. The frankincense, which was, you can tell from the word, it was an incense. It came from a tree that we cut, and the resin would come out, we grind it up, you burn it, and it smelled good. People also used it for some medicinal purposes. But what it's a picture of is the purity and holiness of his life. He never sinned from the day he was born to the day he laid down his life willingly. He never committed a sin because he was holy and he was right. So that he could become what the myrrh represented. You see, myrrh was another spice that was used in a number of different ways, but one of its primary uses was to put around dead bodies, to pack around them so that they didn't smell so bad, to cover up the smell of death. Even at his birth, he had us bringing him a gift that signified his death, because he was born to die for the sins of men. That was his purpose. That's why he came. That's why God took all of that godliness and stuffed it in a little baby boy. When I saw that in our ignorance, he could still use us and still point the picture of what he had done, I purposed in my heart to trust in him. And I have from that day on. Fortunately, I kept in touch with my buddy Bausum, and he told me all about the life of Jesus when he came of age and began to preach. And so I'm preaching to you today, like I would preach to anybody else that let me come in there without my skirt on. And I'm saying, come to him. Come to him. Maybe you're like the shepherds. You need, him just to walk you upside the head and say, this is Jesus. That's what you need. Hey, this is Jesus. Maybe you need to understand that he's wiser than you. He's smarter than you. He doesn't have to take a backseat intellectually to a scientist or to a different philosophy in this whole world, because from God's perspective, everything he's done makes really good sense. I appeal to you, if that's who you are. Come to Jesus. Don't deny his presence. Let the person who is wisdom become part of your life.
Let's bow our heads for a moment. In just a minute, we're going to open up the altar. If you're a guest with us, this is a time that we encourage you to do whatever it is